Okay, so next step, here we go. So we were just finishing off this passage. My 15 minutes were up. Interesting thing, though, if we think about the timing of this test, we've got a 120-minute test. It took me 15 minutes to read the prompt and the passages and highlight, which means I've got plenty of time to work through my planning and my writing. Remember to take your time. So let's finish off this last paragraph, and then I'm going to plan for this essay. For artists serious about their careers, turning down any form of corporate sponsorship or licensing agreement could be a mistake. At times, it's not only necessary, but a smart way to make it in today's music business. Okay, so now what I'm going to do is I'm going to pick up my planning sheet and I'm going to think through on paper what's going on in these highlights, and I'm going to categorize that into support or opposition for the use of artist music in advertising. Now, one of the things I noticed was that the first passage wasn't as strong as the other ones, but in this particular topic, it was kind of on a different topic, but I want to remember that in this essay, I want to avoid overly relying on one source. That is something that can lose points, so I do want to make sure that if at all possible I can use all three in some way, even if it is to refute the other side. So first thing that I've got here, musicians to get their music out there and not as an income source. All right, let's see. So these services should be viewed as a way for musicians to get their music out there, not as an income source. So in terms of artist music and advertising, so one of the reasons that for support of that is getting music out there. And I'm just going to go ahead and put and remind myself right there on my planning that that was from source 1, right? So we can do author's last name or we can do source numbers. I think numbers are easier, but I'm going to make sure to include that so that when I do my essay, I know which source to credit that with. A band can make hundreds of thousands of dollars by agreeing to promote a product or license its music for use in advertisements. So, money, which is probably in all of them. Let's see, Alex Scaly notes that when bands take on corporate sponsors, they may lose their image that they work to create. So that's an opposition one. So, lose image and lose the image that they work to create, and that's one. Scaly does assert that the rules could be different for smaller bands starting out. Okay, so I might want to consider that. I'm going to put that on the support side, better for smaller bands, and I'm going to put that with a question mark because maybe not, however. Okay, so source 2, responsibility to represent the company and help sell its products. So that was in opposition, represent and sell products, and that's source 2. They need to spend energy creating good music and a unique image that appeals to fans, so that's a reason to oppose it. Of course, this article was all on the opposition, and then that third article was all on pro. So let's see, unique image, appeal to fans, take the focus away from what really matters, the music. Take focus away, and that from what matters. And that might be a good quote to actually pull in its entirety. That's a really good quote right there if I want to go on that side. Okay, let's see. And then they had this example of U2 and Apple, which was a really interesting example about kind of turning their music into spam and people getting tired of it. Okay, that's source 2. And then losing control over your music. Losing control over how it can be used. Okay. The band already has an image of itself as being somewhat rebellious. Selling its music to a corporation can leave fans feeling betrayed. Fans betrayed. Alright, source 2. Turn the art into just another tool for corporations. Alright, that's kind of the same thing. Alright, so last one was definitely pro. So it's becoming the norm. It's the norm anyways. That might be a reason. and needed to sustain business, the music business. Okay, beautiful. By the end of the tour, and then under the category of it's needed to sustain the music business, there's this example of how touring costs so much. So touring costs a lot. Okay. And then there's the Shins example of, which I personally love that band. So I'm going to put the Shins as an example of getting their music out, and that could go along with that. It's better for smaller bands kind of thing. Okay, so, and thinking about it as an opportunity might be useful, and exposure. Those are good academic domain specific words for this particular topic, so I might want to use those particular words as well. Okay, so what I'm seeing is that this topic is absolutely totally doable on either side, which makes it really great because we can argue either way and we can go with the one that we feel strongest about. At this point, though, I need to think about which one I want to write, which one I think was stronger. Honestly, to me, either one would be as easy. So I just need to think about which one I want to write. I think for my purpose, I'm just going to go ahead and support it. I think that's going to be easiest for me personally. But either one would be fine because there's plenty of evidence. So at this point, I want to look at the support side and I want to think about how I can organize these topics into 2 or 3 broader categories of things. So right now I've got in support of artist music and advertising, I want to get the music out there, that we need it for the money. It's better for smaller bands. It's become the norm, which I probably will include something about that maybe in my intro, but that's not really a topic in itself. It's needed to sustain the music business. And then I've got that example of how much touring costs. And then there's that example of the Shins getting their music out, and that we should be thinking about it as an opportunity for exposure. So exposure, getting their music out there, one of the biggest things, and then money, I think, is the other biggest thing. So for me, if I were writing this essay, what I would do is I would organize it into, an essay with just big, chunky body paragraphs because there's so much to say about both sustaining the music industry in terms of money, as well as there's so much to say about exposure to smaller bands, getting your music out there, those kinds of things. So I think that's what I would do. Now, I also need to think about the opposition and how I'm going to refute that. Now, I usually do that right away in the first introduction paragraph. So let's go ahead and just work on the intro paragraph. I'm not going to write the whole essay for you. You don't need to watch me forever. But I'm going to go ahead and work on this intro paragraph and think about how this could happen. I think this norm, let's see, what was once taboo has now become the norm. I kind of like that as an opener, or maybe I would use it in my title or something like that, because that's kind of nice. So I think I'm going to pull that right away. Let's see how I want to do that. So, using artists, music, and advertising using artists, music, and advertising is not only let me think. Using artists, music, and advertising is not only an important topic, but it is one that, Using artist music in advertising. Let's change this again. As taboo as music in advertising can be, all right, as taboo as music in advertising can be, it needs to be accepted as the norm. I'm going to go ahead and make sure that I credit source 3. Okay, and I can just go ahead and put that 3 there. The period goes on the outside of the citation because it is a direct quote. So, as taboo as music and advertising can be, it needs to be accepted as the norm. Particularly indie and smaller bands say in particular instead. In particular, indie and smaller bands cannot risk losing the exposure that advertising can afford them. The music business is not an easy business to make money in. While some might feel that using an artist's music in an advertisement, let's see, like, what was it, takes their focus away from the music, and I'm going to use that was from source 2. Okay. While some might feel that using an artist's music in an advertisement takes their focus away from the music, the exposure and income that advertising gives an artist could I like this. Okay, so as taboo as music and advertising can be, it needs to be accepted as the norm. In particular, indie and smaller bands cannot risk losing the exposure that advertising can afford them. The music business is not an easy business to make money in. While some might feel that using an artist's music in an advertisement takes their focus away from the music, the exposure and income that advertising gives an artist could allow them to focus much more so on their music. Having using music in advertising should be considered as an opportunity, and that was from source 3. Not a loss. Alright, as taboo as music and advertising can be, it needs to be accepted as the norm. In particular, indie and smaller bands cannot risk losing the exposure that advertising can afford them. The music business is not an easy business to make money in. While some might feel that using an artist's music in an advertisement takes their focus away from the music, the exposure and income that advertising gives an artist